Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sandra Herrick.
Good morning, Denise. Francesco. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm sitting on the deck looking at the pool. The breeze is gorgeous. It is almost summer and my coffee is still warm. So I'm good. And I'm talking to you and everybody else out there. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. For those of you that are tuning in right now to Unscripted via Spreaker, you may be listening to us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. It's great to have you with us. And the chat room is now open at Spreaker.com here on our page, Unscripted. So welcome to the chat room, welcome to the show, and welcome to the topic of change. Seems like there's a lot of change going on lately, huh, Sandy?
Oh, my God. I mean, there is so much sliding at the end of the conveyor belt that it's really quite shocking and moving, and time to pay attention.
Absolutely. Sandy, when you and I get together and we talk about things, it's usually because it's something perhaps that you and I have just recently walked through. Good morning, Nikki Jorgensen.
Hey, Nikki.
Good to have you in the chat room. Or it's something that a lot of people that we know are going through and we're asked to talk about it. But I think this subject really is about not only us, but everyone that we know lately. Yes. All of the changes that we're going through. What are your thoughts about the changes, the upheavals?
Well, I go back down to the core of we're coming out of the Piscean age and we're going into the Aquarian age, and therefore whenever there is a millennium that is shifting from its identity into the next, everything that is fixed with the identity of Pisces, what came because of Pisces, anybody that is interested in astrology, please look at that. But even if you're not into astrology, just know that the cyclicalness of upheaval is at that tipping point where nothing that we're quite familiar with is truly stable. And so we have to look at our new horizon and shift or break. I mean, it's really that deep of a platitude in our lives, shift or break.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of
everybody's going through it.
Everybody is going through it. And I like the way that you put that, shift or break. There are a lot of people that are really being brought to a place of being so uncomfortable or ill at ease with what's going on in their lives that they break the pattern. They're brought literally to a breaking point, body, mind, spirit, emotions. Why is it that in our humanness, do you think, Sandy, that sometimes we just have to be pushed right to the brink until we do something, we make a change?
Well, because we get comfortable, because we do live in denial, because we do want to stay in our comfort zone. And our comfort zone, even if it's uncomfortable, in the reality of it, we get comfortable with being tolerant and capable to endure the discomfort in our lives. We learn coping mechanisms that keep us just safe enough to be able to hang on or not have to have that break, because we're not always in that feral place of survival. We don't like feeling that. We do not like feeling that, oh my God, I have to morph again. And I just want to say that in all due respect, we morph every second of our life. We are species that are biological, and every single second, the sun is in a different place, whether we know it or not. The wind changes, whether we're aware of it or not. The moods that we have are shifting, and we don't always know how to track our moods. And so here we go into the opioids, here we go into the medications, here we go into, make me numb rather than have to really feel what's coming and deal with it. Mm-hmm. And you?
Well, yesterday on your show, Coffee, Tea, and Me, for those of you that haven't listened to that show, you can listen to it on Spreaker, or you can view it on YouTube, of course, Facebook live stream. But there was something that you said during the course of your show that really stuck with me, and I think that it really does pertain to what we're talking about this morning. You were talking about oftentimes we feel that we're looking for love.
Yes.
and we're searching for love, and you made a statement that perhaps what we're really looking for is safety, to feel safe.
Yes. Oh, the goosebumps are my goosebumps. Absolutely.
And I've been thinking about that since your show, and I thought, that really, for me, rings so true, because we're always looking for a place of safety, and even if we perceive that that place of safety is complacency,
yes,
or stagnation,
yes,
oftentimes in pursuit of safety, we will stay there rather than to change.
Exactly. And that becomes then a fraudulent sense of safety. Because sometimes our safety adrenaline literally says, you've been here long enough, it is no longer safe. It is just, it's where you think you're safe, or where you're comfortable enough to hopefully maintain a sense of safety. Don't poke the beast, don't put your finger in the hornet's nest. And there's something in that back of our mind. I guess before I go down that tube, I really want to say, looking for love, I have personally been in such dynamic, loving relationships that I was hanging on to the love as the reality, rather than being able to really see and comprehend how dangerous the relationships were becoming. And so that goes back to the kitchen table, sitting with my mother, when I would say to her, Ma, I'm being beaten up in my new marriage. Ma, this is going on in our family. She goes, well, at least you have love. And it comes from that melodious drifting away of a generation of, you're supposed to have love, and the marriage vows are, until death do us part, good, bad, or ugly. And sometimes when we want love, we keep ourselves in such a dangerous place, because we think if we have love, it'll work out. And that's a myth. Yes, love is important, but it does not always keep us safe. That's what I have to say about that.
And that's exactly the portion of your show yesterday that's been rattling around in my mind. Yeah. How many of us will live for decades under the auspices of false safety rather than change, or fear rather than change? But there's something often that brings us to change, and a lot of times it is something that is sweeping, something that is catastrophic to body, mind, and emotions, that begins to crack open the egg, crack open the psyche, to see that there are possibilities, or the possibilities of change are brought to us through death, through illness, through a variety of ways. And some people are absolutely caught up in the change and perhaps not prepared for change. Some people relish the change. Thank God. How many times I've heard in my practice, when I'm saying to a spouse, I'm so sorry for your loss, and they say to me, I really wish the SOB would have died 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because my life would have been a lot happier. Mm-hmm. And when I asked the question, well, why didn't you separate? Why didn't you leave? Well, I didn't want anyone else spending his money or our money.
Yeah, safety.
Right, safety. So the change is brought to the doorstep through death, or a myriad of other things. And change often brings with it a pause for reflection and realignment, don't you think?
Absolutely. And because we are biological, change comes with the seasons. Change comes with each decade. Change comes with, we grow into something, and we are surprised when we grow out of something. We grow out of a style. We grow out of, how many people do you know that still are dressing up like the 60s?
Right.
Because it's when they had their best hairdo. And, I'm not even exaggerating. My grandma looked good, I'm staying there. And, I know for a fact there are, 4 or 5 different sizes of jeans in my closet that I hope I'll get back into. And right now I'm on the return to some. So, our body changes, our face changes, we see things differently, and I think it's shocking or exciting when all of a sudden there is that stir in our sensitivity. Where's that scratch at the back of our psyche? Or you smell something and the wind has changed. And whenever I had to move, I've moved over 50 some odd times. I mean, it's radical to think I've lived here for almost 15 years. But before that, all of a sudden, the change in the feeling of where I was no longer that I was home or that this was where I was supposed to stay. It didn't mean that I was restless. It didn't mean that I was happy to see the change. It meant, oh my God, my world is altering and I better hang on because if I don't change, it will change without me. And then I'm actually in a free fall that changing was safer than trying to stay the same. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't know that until hindsight. You know, hindsight's 20/20, and there's, I'm going to say I'm getting a lot of body shivers as we're talking, so people are listening. Thank you for really seeing it. And how do we adapt to, there it is, now what? Because you're right, change can happen in a flash when somebody dies, saying tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes. You know, the world is changing. Our sense of safety and denial that I'm going to live here at the bottom of a possible volcano. And it's like, we don't think it's going to happen in our world.
Right.
How many people say to you, I never imagined, I couldn't believe, I can't believe it. I never expected. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's bring up Anthony Bourdain. God bless. Everybody in his world is saying we didn't see it coming. And yet if you see anything that he said in the past 20 years of his interviews, he's always talking about the dark genie. And that he believes that there's that energy inside him that changes him emotionally, more so than drugs or his work, or that there's something inside us that changes us, and we have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's an entire topic in and of itself, isn't it?
It really is. And I look forward to having our show be a part of that. We're doing one about that.
Right. Yeah, Sandy and I have been asked to do a show about suicide and the spiritual aspects of suicide. And one of our listeners, actually more than one of our listeners, has asked us to do that. But in light of recent events with the way that people are changing their lives so dramatically through suicide, I was approached via an email from a listener down south, and we're going to do that. But with regard to, oh my God, I can't believe it happened, I never would have imagined, I've said that to myself.
Absolutely.
I've said that to you. Oh my God, Sandy, if anyone would have told me, I wouldn't have believed it.
Exactly. And that's normal. You know, my rooster just came up on board here, so he may be having an attitude change. He loves to announce his masculinity.
Uh-huh.
You know, we do live in a cocoon and sometimes tunnel vision. We're not supposed to know everything. Otherwise, we would be overwhelmed. So there is that place of sometimes when we see the big wave coming, we can either duck under it and know that, listen, if I go into it and not see the horizon for a while, the wave will pass. And there are some of us that insist, I see the wave, I don't know what to do, and we freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And that frozen moment needs to have some empathy and have some respect, because there's that fear factor inside us when we see change coming, that because we're not agile or we don't have the emotional skill to go into that adrenaline and go into that fight, flight, or the intelligence of run or shift, then we're stunted.
Mm-hmm.
We're really stunted in that frozen place of, I saw it coming, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I freeze. How many times, where somebody's in a situation where they just freeze because everything shuts down?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to have the compassion for all the assortments of things that, whether we know it's coming or it takes our breath away because we didn't see it coming. I mean, way back in the 70s, when I first started going into self-help groups, one of the first lines that ever came out of somebody's mouth as a teacher was, the only thing that is permanent is change.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That is the only thing that is consistent and permanent. We can bank on it. And we as humans try to harness change and think we can corral it, but it is a bronco, and it wins.
Absolutely.
Because it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just normal. What do you think about that as the reality, that change is normal?
Well, for me, I grew up in a military family, so change was a constant for me. Going to 9 different schools as I was growing up, and constantly changing neighborhoods and friends, and all of that was, so change for me was a constant. And yet interpersonal changes, with family and very close friends, is still a challenge for me, although I am learning as I get older to just go with the flow a little bit more. So for me, I was very thankful that I grew up in a family where I was prepared for changes in people of different color skin, cultures. Our neighborhoods, particularly on the Army bases, were very eclectic.
Yes.
And with people from literally all over the world, because GIs would marry women from all over. And so I got to explore things that most kids just don't get to. But it still doesn't mean that the interpersonal relationships, those closest to me, when those things change, that I'm not affected.
I think it's important that we also address grief in this place of what happens when change comes, because, people grieve their first home when there was really a core established family of connectiveness. We grieve the loss of a neighborhood. We grieve the loss of a school or a companion in a school. Change doesn't have to be just the death of a loved one. We grieve the shifting of, oh my God, I'm out of college, now what? Oh my God, I've lost my job, now what? And there's that place, because my practice and your practice has that spiritual modality so enriched in what we do. So many people come to us and ask, what did I do wrong?
Yes.
Where did I screw up? Why me? And then feel abandoned by God, Spirit, or their angels, or their faith. And that's when change really is crushing. Mm-hmm. How do you experience that one day?
Well, I do experience that, particularly in my practice with people who have lost a child.
Yes.
How did this happen? I never would have expected. I don't know how my life is going to go on. I don't know what my life is going to look like. How can I possibly exist without? And I often tell people who experience catastrophic or sweeping change through death that they really need to take the time to just be.
Yes.
So many people want to leap right into what's next, or what they feel should be next, or what society feels should be the next, that they don't give themselves time to grieve or to figure out who they are at the precipice of such great change. And I admire the people who are able to say to all of the people who are really doing the best that they can to be helpful, but who continue to bring the casseroles around and stopping by for a visit. I admire the people who can say, and do say, not today. Mm-hmm. I need to have a quiet day today. I'm in a time of reflection. Thank you, but maybe at a later date. And there are those people who cannot handle the change that they may see in their friend who now says not today. And that's okay, but it's if you are grieving, it is not your responsibility to make everyone around you comfortable with your grief.
Exactly. Because most importantly, it's very important to know that as Americans, our culture, we do not embrace grief like some of the other cultures where they're giving you, it's a year in some religions where you don't. You don't have to function in something that is social. You take the time to shut down and tuck it away so that when it is time to come back out, you haven't missed out on reflecting, on being there. One of the great things that I know for change is anger, rage, the rage that change came to you. Mm-hmm. How dare it come and swipe my life away? You know, emotions, the spectrums of emotions that we really need to support people. I know as that therapist in the work that taking someone through their transition of grief. Kubler-Ross is so good to read because grief is not just about someone dying. It's about your world, your reality dying.
Yes.
The way that you know your life is now done. And it's not retrievable the way it was. And I think that's very important because there again, when change comes in that dynamic, so many people will just get over it, just move on, just do something. And I will always refer to this. One of my great friends, Caroline Dahlia, was sitting with me in Europe when I was talking about some of the changes in my life, and she said, you know, you need to give your body a chance because you're in a new country to smell the different aromas, to look at the horizons, listen to the song of the voices of another language, and let your body adjust. And when change comes, whether it's a choice of change or a force of change, we still have to allow our senses to calibrate and register our reality. Where are we? You know, after the storm, you look out. Okay, the house is safe or not, and how do I get safe? Who needs to be safe? Mm-hmm. What's happened? Mm-hmm. And we do start to come out and look. And it is astounding, generationally is proven, we build. We rebuild. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's good to see the human spirit does not just stay down.
Right.
We have the fortitude to get up.
Absolutely. After losing a job, you know, changing careers, allowing the change to absorb. I like that allusion to smelling and feeling the difference in the country. We need to take time to stop and to smell the difference in our lives when there's been a change, just to go quiet, not to necessarily just have an opinion about it and to throw an opinion about the change or place fault for change, but to simply
take blame for it.
Absolutely. But to simply be with change and to appreciate where we've been, where we are in the middle of the change, and where are we going to go with the change. There needs to be a time really just to stop. And you're right, here in the West, we don't do a very good job of just sitting and being with something. In other countries, you know, everything. Todd and I were chatting when we were in Rome. We were buying scarves in Rome at this darling little shop, and it was an event. It's an event to purchase something in one of the shops. It's not just walk up to the cashier, hand over your debit card, and thank you, and maybe thank you, and you're done. It's an event. Feel the texture of the scarf. Try the scarf on. How does it feel to you? How does it look to you? Are you satisfied with it? And then to watch the person in the scarf shop refold the scarf and put it beautifully back into its package to go home with you. Everything is an event. Everything takes time to be enjoyed. And as much as we can rail against change, I have learned in my 55 years that if I take a moment to even relish the change or to posit within myself why the change is occurring, what happens in the next, as you call it, seems to segue much more smoothly, with much more reason, and with an anticipation of something good, even out of something perhaps not so good or joyful. What do you think about that, Sand?
Well, I think you're saying things that are realistic and fundamental and intelligent, because we have to get our sea legs.
Yeah.
We have to get our balance. We need to get our bearings. All these sayings come from the familiar knowing that when change comes, we're tilted. We're off kilter. Mm-hmm. We've lost sight. And so these phrases come from the fact that these events happen, and our society or our family is accustomed to it. Or, the great big one, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And when change really has sucker punched me, because it has often, I'd grab my stomach, really work at trying to find my breath, and then find a mantra or an intention or an affirmation, even if it's a prayer. Or I find someone that is a staple in my life to become a touchstone. Mm-hmm. And so it's important when change comes to know that there are hands reaching out to us. Do we want to take them? Or when we're ready, how do we take them? But also to be able, and this was the most important thing, I've learned since the beginning of time, to come out of the secret that we're suffering and we've lost our way, or something that has happened to us has taken our way away from us. And if we can talk about it, if we can have the dignity rather than the shame, because shame will keep us still. It will paralyze us. That change has happened. We didn't have control. We didn't get it right in our own mind. We failed. Makes me breathe. To speak, to finally be able to say the truth. And have someone listen without trying to repair it right away. But listen to what needs to be touched, cared for, allowed, believed. Then change starts to happen, because all of a sudden we're seen again. And if someone has come to see us or find us, just like under the rubble of a building, oh my God, the mudslides in Santa Barbara, they get the dogs, someone sees you're there, hears you're there, and they will come get you. Because sometimes we are trapped. Mm-hmm. But we need to be in that place of speak. Let the secret be known so that you're not hidden in the overwhelm of change, or however you experience it. There's so many ways to describe it, because there's so many modalities of change. Mm-hmm.
So, Sandy, have you ever been the agent of change yourself?
Oh, good God. Yeah, in all due respect, if we're going to talk karma and life and this, that, and the other thing, change comes because our soul is restless, mm-hmm. or demanding that we grow. Mm-hmm. I've changed things reluctantly, and I've changed things abruptly. And it's amazing how when I'm reluctant, it's because my heart hasn't settled on something yet. And when my heart settles on something, or my soul insists it's time to blow. When my soul insists it's time to blow, change comes through me that stops me from resisting change. It is an absolute phenomenon where all of a sudden the universe inside me goes, no more, Sandy, get out of my way. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen now, and let the chips fall where they do. And I'm always astounded with my mind is thinking one way, or my actions are maneuvering me another way. But my soul says there's only one way out of here, and everything's going to go down. Mm-hmm.
How do you prepare yourself for that, Sandy?
That's a great question, and I think the only way I can prepare myself for me, or have prepared myself, is knowing that there's something deeper inside me that knows something more clearly than my filters or my emotions or the way I'd like to hang on knows. And that there is, even in the horror of, oh my God, here it comes, there's a goodness with, it was really necessary. And it does change family dimensions. It changes business dynamics. It changes my dimension with like, coulda, woulda, shoulda, I wish I didn't, but there it is. Mm-hmm. And there is a gratitude inside me that refuses to let me die in my own need to stagnate. Mm-hmm. Thinking I'm going to hang on as long as I can and not change. Because when I do that, in all due respect, the people that I'm with or the situations I am in are psychologically, subconsciously, energetically, karmically, spiritually changing with me. Mm-hmm. And we're all kind of waiting for who's going to go first.
Exactly. Because very rarely does change happen in a vacuum, whether we are the agent of change or whether we are in the tailwinds of change.
Right.
Change rarely happens in a vacuum. And for myself, when I'm thinking about changes that I'm about to make or create, I often think to myself, what will be the impact on others? And and so I try to be the agent of change as gently as possible when I'm able to do that, but always taking into consideration, what is this going to look like for other people, and is that more important than the death of my soul,
right,
or the death of my physical body due to disease and illness because of stagnation?
Right. I have the awareness that my soul doesn't, me, Sandy, I don't really want to hurt anyone. That is not my intention. But when that thing blows, people do get hurt. And I acknowledge I will be responsible for it. I apologize, or I acknowledge I've hurt you. And maybe I'm not even apologizing that I hurt you. It's just I acknowledge there's hurt, but something had to happen. And I want to talk about abuse at this level because it's psychological, emotional, physical, or spiritual. Part of my encounter is how much abuse did I tolerate because I was refusing to change, until all of a sudden something inside me blows and says, because the abuser, the perpetrator, is someone that says, oh, you'll take that? And you're not going to change, because maybe they don't know how to change, and they provoke it.
Yes.
And when we have somebody provoking change and we resist that, it makes tears come to me, because I know that I am a product of that, of me supporting abuse to me, toward me, or around me, because it's like, if we just get through this, we don't have to change. If I just tolerate this and don't say something, we don't have to change. If I just duck and don't, bring it up, then I'll wait until the next time. And that is very much like the show yesterday, denial, thinking what is true can be manipulated or harnessed when someone really is saying, I'm going to change and I can't do it, so I am going to take you down until you do. Mm-hmm. And then we have to.
Right.
Here's my first belch of the day. Everybody that's listening, when I really get into soul country and there's a healing, I belch. Mm-hmm. So, I want to be able to make this one of those conversations, Dana, that we're all on both sides of the court in this game.
Right.
Nobody's on the fence in the middle. We all have abused and we have all been abusive, even if it does not mean intent.
Right.
We didn't intend to. It happens because of friction. And because there's friction, there's change. I see a sheep coming up to eat my flowers. Hello, Pam. The gate's open, so the animals are coming and going, I know there's edibles up there. Hi, Pan. Hi, Angel. Let's go. Come on. How do you feel about that? We all take our own roles in this, and we are, not everybody's Lily White.
Well, that's true. I know I'm certainly not Lily White in the course of my lifetime by any stretch of the imagination. Somebody once said to me, a friend of mine said, when people say to me, I'm no saint, or I'm certainly not one to throw stones. She said, whenever anybody says that, I become suspicious of their character and who they are. And it makes me think that perhaps they're just not the kind of person that I want to be around. They're hiding something. And I said to her, perhaps what they're saying to you and admitting to you is that they are human.
Exactly.
Because there isn't anybody who doesn't have a skeleton in the closet. There isn't anybody who hasn't been the agent of change or the force of change or what have you. That's part of the human condition. And she just looked at me like, oh, I never thought of it that way. So no, we're not all saints, and we're here to have a human life with all of the conditions of life, and that includes change. And, one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is the allowance of change. And sometimes that just comes with age. And sometimes it's just something that's part of life from the very beginning. But change can bring so much beauty after we've spent time in the being with what was and mourning what was. I mean, even the change of being married to divorced, there should be a mourning period. Because I don't believe most people go to the altar thinking that, well, this will be done in a couple of years, so, we'll give it the best shot we've got for the next 24 months. There should always be a mourning period, or just a period to sit and to be. With change, not everybody likes changes that we go through personally, do they, Sandy?
Heck no. One of the great things that, as you were just talking about, to change. One of the greatest changes in my life was the fires in Yellowstone. When I was young, I drove across country in a 1958 Volkswagen bus with my friend Jean from high school. We were second-year art students, and we decided to drive across the nation, and off we went. And when we got to Yellowstone, it was such a great big to-do to get there. But then when I got there, it was so overgrown and so protected that you really didn't see anything because you're driving down the roads and looking at the forest. We were at the upper falls and lower falls, and the bears were out. And we had pictures of the bear claws coming through our visor window, the little slip window there on the side, and we're all giggling because we're giving them crackers and everything else, and we're thinking we're safe, and it's like, these are wild animals. Okay, then all of a sudden the fire comes in 88. So 20 some odd years later, they're still saving the forests and the national parks. The fire strikes, and it's cataclysmic. Wow. It goes on and on and on. And what do the naturalists find? That by saving the forest from not allowing nature to burn it and change it with a lightning storm or a drought or this, that the foliage piled up on the ground. When the big fire came, it burned and smoldered because it had not been cleared off in decades. And I moved out to Yellowstone area in 98, and the great view, talk about, I'm sad for the animals, all that stuff that was affected, but the great view of seeing the landscape of the natural forest because the trees were scorched down to the ground.
Wow.
I thought, oh my God, I want my nieces and nephews to come out here while I'm living here. Oh, it gives me the shivers to say it. So that they can see the landscape, because when they have children, it'll be grown again. And I actually want them to be able to come out here and say, we were out here with Sandy, and, see for miles. You could see the horizon. And knowing that in my soul, I brought everybody to see the view because I knew it would change. And that was one of those moments where I was in nature. Did I lose you?
Well, you just did for just a brief moment. So I think in the excitement of talking about of Yellowstone.
Okay.
But you're back.
Okay, where was the story when we lost each other?
Well, you were just talking about the fact that you brought everyone out there to see Yellowstone in its current condition, knowing that it was about to change and that it would change.
And so we become historians of our own lives.
Yes.
And great historians tell the story of change, not necessarily of how things have never changed and everything is still the same. Great historians talk about the change. And I felt like I was a historian of nature at that moment.
That's beautiful.
And we are historians of our lives.
We are. We are.
I mean, look at your trip. Look at your trip to Greece and to Rome. The beauty of the changes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You looked at history and each century, each millennium.
Uh-huh.
And that's where it's all striking, the change.
Yes. Yes.
And nobody that built those buildings is alive.
Exactly. And so what do we bring away? Travel. This morning I posted a great quote from Anthony Bourdain about travel. And the fact that travel can be excruciating. It can be heartbreaking. It can change us, and it should change us. Mm-hmm. And boy, isn't that the truth. Travel, whether we're traveling through the course of our own life or traveling through the course of any set of circumstances, let alone traveling abroad, we do have the propensity to change, and I do believe we should change because life should change us to help us fully realize who we are in all of the aspects of who we are, saint, sinner, whatever, mother, sister, all of those sorts of things. And for some people, our exploration, the travel through our own lives and stepping here and stepping there and what about this and what about that, can and does make the people in our lives, not all of them, uncomfortable, and some so uncomfortable that they choose to leave or they choose to disassociate. And so some people will then stop traveling through their life, through the change, in order to preserve the comfort of those around them. I've learned in my life not to do that.
Yeah. There's that place, and God bless Anthony Bourdain. He was, they're part of his soul was affecting me in his transition and in his choice to die. So I want to honor that. And I agree completely. Having the opportunity to travel to Europe and other countries, what's so wonderful is to see the lifestyles of other people that they experience as everyday normal, that when we enter it, it's like, holy God, how the hell do they even live like this?
Right. Right.
And, no one that is called an old soul stayed in one place without learning something about many other places. Change offers us wisdom. It gives us insight. It makes us expand and contract. And it gives us the opportunity to become aware of things that if we did not change, we would not have had the opportunity to experience and register and then offer as wisdom to others that are going through change. Everything that's ever happened to me on my 70th birthday, standing in San Francisco up at the top of the Mart, as much as I love San Francisco, when I stood there, all of a sudden I realized part of my love for San Francisco was that I was not even knowing it in my 20s, that I would be standing right where I was standing on my 70th and kind of look back at my history, and it was very energetic, and go, oh my God, it all makes sense. because it brought me to this moment. Who I am in this moment is the total sum of every aspect of change that has ever affected me and everyone that I have affected in my change and changing with them. And it all made sense. Doesn't mean I like it or doesn't mean I have opinions, but it made sense. And in that sense, I became calm with, wow, it all had to happen. And it got me here at this view, in this beauty, with people that I love and love me. And it was a moment. It was a moment. And so I really paused in that moment and drunk in what my whole life changed. I never lost Lori, Dennis, and her children. They were there for my 70th. And it gave me that sense of, these are the anchors in my life that let me change. They support, they have reaction, but they really love me through my change. And that was the spin-off to the next, I mean, I know I'm running into the end. You know, if you're 70, how many years you got? If I'm lucky, you know, I want to be conscious for all of it. So I'm beginning the change of, I want to really live the rest of my life alive.
I love that. Living your life alive. Because a lot of people live their life, you know, clinically dead.
Yeah.
I've never been one of those people. You know, it's interesting. As you know, Elise and I are painting the lanai, and it's been a 2-week project because our deck that I call the lanai is absolutely gigantic. And yesterday she and I were talking about the fact that my son Dane and his lady love Amber are getting ready to go for 2 weeks in the Rocky Mountains again.
Wow.
And Elise and Matthew are getting ready to go to Hogwarts down at Universal Studios.
Oh my God, how much fun!
Big fun.
Both of the trips.
Yeah, and this coming weekend on Father's Day, they will be erecting the memorial for their father who passed. It'll be 2 years on Labor Day weekend.
Oh my gosh.
And we were talking about travel, and she said, you know, Mom, looking back and knowing that now we know that Dad was really sick and he just wasn't telling us how sick he was. The one thing that he kept saying to me and Dane was, make sure you travel. Forget about having a big fancy house and big fancy cars. Get out there and travel and see the world.
Yeah.
And that moment when he was saying those things to the both of them, they did not know that he only had, you know, weeks to live. But it changed their life and it changed their view about life and the way that they would go forward in their life regarding, you know, how big of a house do you really need? How big of a car do you really need? And what are the priorities in life? It was a moment of change. And for my son, who really doesn't like change, to see him so wanting to have every moment of his life something that is absolutely exquisite, and he's now passionate about travel and those things. It is amazing the legacy that our lives can leave with regard to change, and how our lives perhaps have prompted change within others. Has anyone ever helped you change your life just based on being who they are, Sandy?
Everybody in my life.
Uh-huh.
And I mean that with the greatest of respect. And there are key people in my life, absolutely, that insisted I changed. I mean, I want to talk about Bonnie Brown, Professor Reverend Bonnie Brown. I was in that transition. Okay, I got divorced. I worked already in, you know, high-rise buildings and had a high-rise apartment. And I'm just 25 years old, and everything collapsed. I thought I was on the trajectory to success. And boy, look at me. And, you know, I'm going to make my parents proud. And I'm making it. And it fell apart so quickly that I went back home and my mother suggested, why don't you go to school? And so I have to say my mother is one of the greatest people in my life to offer change when I was stagnant or stilled. And so I met Bonnie Brown and Ann Chernow, my art teacher. Those two women saw me not as my family saw me. They saw me at that break-off point from, Sandy, you have psychic gifts and you are artistic. Come blend something, be something. And they both took me to the side at separate times and thought, we see that you're unique. And it was no longer, you're a nice kid and you have a good smile and you get along with everybody. It's, you have to hone yourself, Sandy. You can't expect to live a normal life. It's not going to work for you. And then my teachers, Jean and Eva Grant, again, Sandy, you're not an herbalist. You work with spirit. You work with intelligence. It's like, okay, but what does that mean? And so people were able to see things inside me that I did not see, but was showing itself. And I think that's important for everybody, is that change, we think we can hide change, but there are sightful individuals who see the shimmer in us. And when there's the shivers. When they see that shimmer, listen to what someone sees in you when they lovingly say, there's a shift coming and you're shifting.
Right.
Beckon it.
Mm-hmm.
Be brave to walk into it.
Mm-hmm.
And know that if you don't let go, you will be torn away from what you're hanging on to.
And isn't that the truth? The being torn away from what you're hanging on to, that is so true. And some people will wait for the being torn away from. Right now, there are probably people listening to us that are in the middle of being torn away from, or choosing to walk away from, or choosing to metamorphose into something new. Sandy, for those that are listening, and they're listening to us because they're going through great change right now in their life, what do you say to them about preparing for or moving through change?
Well, first and foremost, I and you are very gifted in the empathicness of offering them the compassion, the awareness, and the honest-to-goodness love of, we see that change is happening. And we see the discomfort in it or the excitement of it. It all depends on the value of the transition and the experience in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I offer to anyone that is truly in the suffering of change or the angst of change, the compassion of, hang on, because this too will change. This will pass.
Right.
And the endurance of it may be unbearable, but to bear with it bears fruit in time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of the surprise of, I didn't see this coming. I would never expected my life could be good again.
Mm-hmm.
Because those sayings are just as palpable to be surprised with as, I didn't see it coming and it's bad, to, man, I didn't see this coming and it's good.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to say is that when change comes, there's always a benefit somewhere, even in the horror of the change. And that takes time for attraction, for friction to manifest. So take your time, respect your time, and know you are being respected and respectful about your time. And this is life. I mean, it's that bold, that simple, that ornate, and that ordinary. Mm-hmm. This is life.
Right.
Welcome to it.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that it's okay to say no.
That's right.
To the invitations after change or during change. It's okay to say, I just need to be by myself. I just need to think things through on my own. Thank you very much for your opinion about my change or the change I'm going through. But at this time, I just need to be with it and to move through it. It's okay to not accept the casserole every single day.
Right. Or to entertain somebody that wants to look good because they're taking care of you.
Exactly. And it is okay to reach out and ask for help during change, and to accept help when it's being offered. If it's not being offered, to make a phone call or text or whatever you're comfortable with. That is also a great good thing. And I'm also of the opinion that, and the thought that, the way each and every person goes through their changes in life, even the changes that we as women go through hormonally, the way that we do it is the way that we do it. And it's unique to each and every one of us. There is no set way of moving through change.
No. And even if someone lives in the same house as their parents they grew up in, if someone lives in the same town, you may not be changing your quote-unquote locale. You're living in one place. The change of life still comes because people come and go.
Right.
The landscape alters. A building goes down, a building goes up. The neighborhood changes. Your friends that you have in kindergarten are still your friends, and yet their lives change. And so change can be as subtle if you're standing in one place for the whole of your life, or bold, and change could be radical if you're moving around, but that's the way your life is. And so I think that knowing that we change doesn't have to be something that's galactic. It can be subtle, and it still affects us deeply. Change is change. Change is change.
And with that, Sandy, we're at the top of the hour. I know that you have an appointment there in Walpole.
I do.
And so thank you for spending time with me again this morning. And I look forward to seeing you here next weekend. For those of you that are here in the West Michigan area, those of you that are driving up to West Michigan or flying into West Michigan for the upcoming events, Sandra and Sir Charles will be here at the Temple Within School of Sacred Studies next Friday evening for a wonderful event. And also Saturday and Sunday, Sandy and I are teaching a closed event. All day Saturday, all day Sunday. Saturday evening, we'll be enjoying a sweat lodge or inipi together. So lots of good things going on. For those of you on Facebook, please look up our page, Unscripted, and take a look at my Facebook group, the Temple Within School of Sacred Studies, to see what Sandy and I are up to together. With that, Sandy, have a magnificent day, and thank you for being an agent of positive change in my life.
Oh my God, right back at you. And I'd like to go to soulawakenings.org, and you can see my site, and Lily is changing my site, so soon I'll have a new website, and look forward to that change. And I want to say just before we go, there's going to be so much change next weekend. I want to thank you for being an ally and a comrade and a conspirator. Get ready, people. Agents of change.
Have a beautiful day, Sandy.